We live in an age of digital chaos. Bombarded by news, memes, and endless short videos, social media pulls us into infinite scrolls that consume our time and attention. The way we think about human connection today is worlds apart from what it was just 20 years ago. Ironically, despite how connected we seem, loneliness is at an all-time high. Meeting friends, having simple daily social interactions, and even starting relationships or families has become harder than ever. Male loneliness, female loneliness, parasocial relationships, these themes are being dissected and discussed endlessly online. Mental health is one of the biggest concerns of our time, sparking countless conversations. But what even is loneliness exactly? How is it different from simply being alone? Is every introvert a lonely person? And if I don't feel bad about being alone, does that mean something's wrong with me? For me, anime is more than just entertainment. It's a lens through which we can explore relatively complex topics and ideas. By looking at specific characters and their stories, we can uncover lessons about what loneliness truly means and how we can learn to deal with it. When I started reflecting on the meaning of loneliness, Guts was the first character that came to my mind. What's fascinating is that for a good part of his story, Guts wasn't physically alone. He often had people around him and, unfortunately, experienced some of the worst horrors humanity has to offer. At its core, though, his story is about battling an existential loneliness, a burden he seemed destined to carry from the moment he was found as a baby beneath a tree of corpses. Branded as a bearer of bad luck for everyone around him, he grew up in a brutal environment, surrounded by death and war, and endured countless tragedies. He lost his adoptive mother and was blamed for her death. He was subjected to abuse, having his body sold by the very person who was supposed to be his male role model, and ultimately had to kill him to survive. And all of this happened before the eclipse, the most devastating event in his story. Guts' experience with humanity was deeply traumatizing, leaving him profoundly skeptical of others. His loneliness doesn't stem from simply being alone or even feeling isolated. It's rooted in his distorted perception of himself as the source of tragedy for everyone he encounters, combined with the endless betrayals and suffering inflicted by those around him. This emotional and psychological abyss is not about solitude, it's about a social dilemma. Is it even worth letting people into my life? If they're bad, I'll end up betrayed. If they are good, I'll inevitably bring tragedy to their doorstep. For Guts, the risks always seem to outweigh the rewards. Of course, most of us don't share the same perspective of humanity that Guts does. After all, very few people have faced the sheer scale of tragedy he has dealt with. But the emotional response some of us experience due to our personal social struggles can feel strikingly similar. Yes, bringing people close to you always carries a risk of betrayal. And even if they're good people, you might fear they will be disappointed in you. Your flaws, your mistakes, the things you would rather keep hidden. Over time, being alone can feel like the natural consequence of a pessimistic view of both humanity and yourself. Reaching out to others, trying to make friends or be social, often feels like an exhausting effort for little to no reward. The possibility of rejection is evident, creating a constant state of unease and anxiety. The problem is, humans are social beings. The need to belong to a group or community is deeply ingrained in us. There's an undeniable sense of fulfillment in having peers, friends, who will be there when you need them. That's part of what makes Guts' journey after the eclipse feel so melancholic. Despite being a man consumed by revenge and surrounded by violence, there's an unmistakable sadness in his story. Whether he's cutting through demons, walking through burned villages, or haunted by nightmares every time he closes his eyes, there's a sorrowful weight in his expression. It's the look of a man who sees no other option but to be alone. What could possibly be the antidote to that sadness, to the dilemma of loneliness? Feeling inadequate, rejected, or traumatized by past experiences, and the impact those feelings have on our social interactions is no trivial issue. It's complex, with different paths available, some likely better than others. Naruto and Sasuke are two characters who confronted loneliness in very different ways. One was born into it, ostracized for reasons beyond his control. The other lost everyone he loved in a horrifying betrayal by the person closest to him. Rejection and trauma shaped the paths these two characters took, leading them to drastically different outcomes. Sasuke's choice, while extreme, isn't without justification. His pursuit of revenge at all costs, his willingness to ally with dangerous people to achieve his goals, and his rejection of any meaningful personal connection were all shaped by his tragic past. This path felt almost inevitable given the depth of his pain and trauma, but it came at a steep price. He became a prisoner of his own rage and resentment, utterly consumed by his quest for revenge. He isolated himself completely, unable to grasp even the concept of happiness. Naruto, on the other hand, dealt with rejection and isolation in a fundamentally different way. At first, his extroverted behavior seemed like a shallow attempt to gain popular approval. He dreamed of becoming Hokage not out of a pure desire to lead, but to prove everyone wrong and earn their love and affection. However, Naruto's development as a character goes far beyond this superficial need for attention. Over time, his desire for acceptance transforms into a selfless sense of responsibility. Naruto becomes someone who doesn't just want people to love him. He wants to be there for others, to support them when they need it most. And that shift in perspective is what ultimately saves him from his loneliness. It's fascinating how counterintuitive this idea is, yet it makes perfect sense. Loneliness isn't solved by seeking others for your own sake, whether for validation, attention, or personal interest. The true antidote lies in selflessly being there for others, in ensuring they never have to feel the same pain you have endured. It's about showing them they are not alone. This kind of selflessness, putting others' well-being ahead of your own, isn't easy to achieve. But when you find a few good people worth caring for deeply, this approach might be the key to dealing with loneliness in the most meaningful way. For Guts, the sorrow and emptiness in his eyes don't mark the end of his story. Like Naruto, Guts manages to overcome the existential loneliness within his heart by choosing to protect and stand by others. Characters like Farnese, Serpico, Isidro, and Shuke become his companions, and his decision to be their protective sword transforms his journey. Even after all the trauma he's endured, and despite knowing that the brand marking him as a sacrifice puts those around him in danger, Guts chooses to stay with them. His unwavering will to protect them inspires them to stand by him in return. The scars of his past remain, and the betrayal by Fento will never be forgiven or forgotten. But Guts learns to embrace the good people in his life, safeguarding them at all costs. Paradoxically, it seems that the best way to heal our own hearts is to focus on caring for others' hearts instead of our own. Now, loneliness isn't the same as being an introvert or choosing solitude. Introversion is a personality trait where people prefer quiet, solitary experiences over frequent social interactions. Introverts aren't necessarily shy or lonely. They simply enjoy being alone or sometimes in smaller groups of people rather than in crowds. Similarly, someone who leads a simple life or spends a lot of time alone isn't automatically suffering from loneliness. While it might seem unconventional to use Saitama from One Punch Man as an example, since the anime is a comedic satire, he actually illustrates this point pretty well. Saitama is perfectly comfortable living his life, even if it's mostly solitary. His boredom and longing for a challenge stem not from rejection, trauma, or disappointment, but from his overwhelming power. For the most part, he leads a fairly normal life and is generally satisfied with it, aside from the lack of exciting fights. While he finds social interactions a bit awkward and doesn't actively seek out company, he doesn't reject it either. He's not bitter or resentful, just indifferent. He even goes out of his way to help others when he can. In today's world where loneliness has become such a widespread issue, understanding its root causes and finding ways to address it is more important than ever. It's not an easy problem to solve, but I believe we can learn to deal with it if we embrace a mindset of selflessness, being there for one another. One of my goals in making these videos is to help foster a healthy and engaging community, something that stands in contrast to the online toxicity that often makes us lose faith in humanity. This isn't about creating an echo chamber or expecting everyone to agree with me. It's about genuinely sharing the human experience, with all its disagreements and contradictions, in a way that's constructive and meaningful. Because ultimately, doing our best for one another is the best thing we can do for ourselves. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. Your support is always appreciated. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.